The question pierced through Simon Cowell's soul like a blade of pure truth. 6-year-old Amelia Roberts stood on the Britain's Got Talent stage, her innocent face turned toward the judges' panel as she asked with devastating simplicity, "How does it feel to be empty inside, Mr. Cowell?" What happened next defied every law of human biology. Blood began streaming from Simon's eyes. Not tears mixed with blood, but pure crimson that flowed like rivers down his cheeks as he sat paralyzed with terror. For the first time in television history, emotional emptiness was manifesting as physical bleeding, and what this child had detected would expose the hollow shell that Simon Cowell had become after decades of destroying dreams. But to understand how a 6-year-old's innocent question triggered the most disturbing medical phenomena ever captured on live television, we need to go back to where this nightmare began. It was a cold December morning at the London Palladium, and Britain's Got Talent was conducting final auditions before the holiday break. Simon sat in his familiar throne of judgment, that expression of calculated indifference perfectly in place, ready for another day of crushing Christmas dreams with surgical precision. The morning had been particularly ruthless. Simon had dismissed a children's choir as an assault on the Christmas spirit, told a young dancer her performance made the Nutcracker look like a masterpiece, and suggested a family act, find a new hobby that doesn't involve public humiliation. Each brutal critique had been delivered with Simon's signature blend of cold efficiency and barely concealed contempt. The audience laughed nervously, the cameras captured every soul-destroying moment, and Simon basked in his role as entertainment's most feared Christmas Grinch. "Next up," announced the production coordinator, "we have Amelia Roberts, age 6, from Liverpool. She says she wants to ask the judges some questions." Simon barely looked up from his notes. 6-year-olds asking questions usually meant adorable inquiries about favorite colors or Christmas wishes. He prepared himself for 3 minutes of manufactured cuteness that would require a patronizing smile and an obligatory yes vote. But when Amelia Roberts walked onto that stage, the temperature in the studio seemed to drop 10 degrees. She moved with an ethereal stillness that was deeply unsettling in someone so young. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and her green eyes held a depth that seemed impossible for a 6-year-old. She wore a plain red dress that should have looked festive, but somehow appeared ominous under the stage lights. More disturbing was her expression, not the excitement or nervousness typical of child contestants, but a profound sadness that seemed far too heavy for such small shoulders. "Hello there, sweetheart," Simon said, his voice taking on the condescending tone he used for very young performers. "What's your name?" "Amelia Roberts," she replied, but her voice carried no childish enthusiasm. It was steady, serious, almost mournful. "And you're 6 years old?" "Yes, Mr. Cowell, and I have some questions for you." Simon's eyebrow raised with mild amusement. Children asking him questions during auditions was unusual, but not unheard of. Usually they wanted to know about his life or his job. "Oh, and what questions do you have for me, Amelia?" Amelia tilted her head, studying Simon with an intensity that made him unconsciously lean back in his chair. "I've been watching you on TV for a long time, Mr. Cowell. My mummy records your shows, and I watch them when I'm in the hospital." The studio audience found this touching, some people making sympathetic sounds at the mention of hospital visits. Amanda Holden looked concerned. Alessia Dixon leaned forward with interest. David Walliams was preparing his gentle, encouraging expression. But Simon felt something else, a strange coldness spreading through his chest. "I'm sorry to hear you've been in the hospital, Amelia," Simon said with practiced sympathy. "Are you feeling better now?" "I'm dying, Mr. Cowell," Amelia replied matter-of-factly. "The doctors say I have maybe 3 months left, but that's not why I'm here." The studio fell silent. This wasn't the heartwarming backstory they'd expected. "I'm here because I notice things about people when I watch them on TV," Amelia continued. "And I notice something about you that makes me very sad." Simon's discomfort was growing, but he maintained his professional composure. "And what do you notice about me, Amelia?" That's when Amelia Roberts asked the question that would change everything. "How does it feel to be empty inside, Mr. Cowell?" The moment those words reached Simon's ears, something impossible began happening. Blood started flowing from Simon's eyes, not the natural tears that might come from emotion, but actual blood. Thick, crimson streams that immediately stained his cheeks and dripped onto his expensive black shirt. Simon's hand flew to his face, feeling the warm liquid that shouldn't exist. When he looked at his fingers, they were covered in blood. "What?" Simon tried to speak, but more blood flowed from his eyes, making it difficult to see. Amelia watched with the clinical interest of someone much older than 6. It started when you made the Christmas choir cry yesterday, Mr. Cowell. That's when the emptiness inside you began bleeding out through your eyes. The studio was in chaos. The other judges were staring in horror as Simon continued bleeding from his eyes, the impossible sight captured by cameras that kept rolling despite the medical emergency unfolding. "This isn't possible," Simon gasped, trying to wipe the blood away, but it kept flowing. "I can see inside people, Mr. Cowell," Amelia explained with 6-year-old directness. "Most people have light inside them, or love, or dreams. But when I look at you, there's just a big empty hole where your heart should be." Simon's bleeding intensified, and he realized with growing horror that he felt no physical pain, only a profound, aching emptiness that seemed to be literally draining out of him. "The hole gets bigger every time you hurt someone," Amelia continued. "Every dream you destroy makes you more empty inside. And now the emptiness is so big that it's bleeding out of your eyes because there's nowhere else for it to go." Medical personnel rushed toward the stage, but they stopped in confusion when they realized this wasn't a normal medical emergency. "How do you treat someone whose emotional void is manifesting as physical bleeding?" "Make it stop," Simon pleaded, blood now flowing steadily down his face. "I can't make it stop, Mr. Cowell," Amelia said sadly. "Only you can do that. You have to fill up the empty space with something good, or you'll just keep bleeding until there's nothing left of you." Simon tried to stand, but the blood loss was making him dizzy. For the first time in his career, the man who had never shown vulnerability was completely helpless. "I don't understand what's happening to me," Simon whispered. "You're bleeding out all the emptiness you've been filling yourself with for years," Amelia explained. "Every time you chose to be mean instead of kind, every time you laughed at someone's pain instead of helping them, every time you picked cruelty over compassion, it all created empty spaces inside you." The bleeding was relentless now, and Simon was beginning to feel weak. But something else was happening too. With each drop of blood that fell, he was experiencing flashes of memory. Every child he'd reduced to tears, every dream he'd crushed for entertainment, every moment he'd chosen cruelty over kindness. "I can see all the empty spaces, Mr. Cowell," Amelia continued. "They look like black holes where your feelings should be, and they're all shaped like the people you hurt." Simon's vision was becoming blurry from the blood loss, but he could swear he was seeing shapes in the crimson drops, faces of contestants he'd destroyed, children whose dreams he'd murdered for television ratings. "Please," Simon begged, "tell me how to make it stop." Amelia's expression softened for the first time since taking the stage. "You have to fill up the empty spaces with love, Mr. Cowell. Real love. Not TV love, not fake love, the kind of love that puts other people's feelings before your own entertainment." "I don't know how," Simon admitted, his voice barely audible. "Start by saying you're sorry," Amelia suggested. "Not to me, to all the empty spaces inside you. Say sorry to every person whose light you put out, every dream you killed, every heart you broke." For the next 10 minutes, as blood continued streaming from his eyes, Simon Cowell did something he'd never done in his entire career. He apologized. Really apologized. Not for the cameras, not for damage control, but to fill the emptiness that was literally bleeding out of him. "I'm sorry to every child I made cry," he whispered through the blood. "I'm sorry to every dreamer I destroyed. I'm sorry for choosing cruelty over kindness, for picking entertainment over empathy." Gradually, the bleeding began to slow. "That's better," Amelia said approvingly. "The empty spaces are getting smaller, but you'll have to keep filling them with good things, or they'll just get empty again." When the bleeding finally stopped, Simon had lost enough blood to require hospitalization. But more than that, he'd lost something else, the callous indifference that had defined his career. The episode never aired in its original form, but the footage became legendary among those who witnessed it. Amelia Roberts had done something that no amount of criticism or controversy had ever accomplished. She had made Simon's emotional emptiness literally visible. Simon returned to television eventually, but he was fundamentally changed. His critiques became constructive rather than destructive, focused on helping rather than hurting. And every morning, he looked in the mirror to make sure his eyes were clear, checking that the emptiness inside hadn't started bleeding out again. Amelia Roberts passed away 2 months later, but not before receiving a personal visit from Simon, who had driven to Liverpool to thank her for saving him from his own emptiness. "I'm not empty anymore," he told her in her hospital room. "You filled up all the holes with something better." Amelia smiled, the first truly happy expression anyone had seen from her. "I know, Mr. Cowell. Your eyes aren't bleeding anymore. That means your heart is working again." Today, Simon Cowell still judges talent shows, but he judges with a full heart rather than an empty one. Because a 6-year-old girl taught him that emptiness has a cost, and sometimes that cost is paid in blood. The question that made Simon Cowell bleed from his eyes had revealed a truth more powerful than any critique, that what we fill ourselves with determines what flows out of us, and sometimes it takes a dying child to show us that kindness is the only cure for the emptiness that destroys us from within.